Hi again, it's Ryan. Before we get going today, I just want to mention that it has been a very long time since there's been a video in this series. Um, Things happened, and this just wasn't a priority for a while, so it got put to the side. And I did continue to think about the project, and those of you who have been paying attention throughout this series will probably notice some inconsistencies between what I originally said I had intended to do and what I end up doing. Because thinking about how I'm going to use this computer when it's done, some of those things just really didn't seem to be necessary, and a couple other things did. And the way that I had originally planned on doing things. Thinking about it, I came up with other ways that I thought might work better. Okay, so there may be some inconsistencies if you've been watching from episode 1 of this series. The first half of this video was filmed many months ago. The building of the control board, and when that was finished, it was about when the project got temporarily shelved. So those clips are from many months ago. Just recently, I did the rest of it, and so this video is really an amalgam of 2 different time periods. By the end of the video, you will see the LCD screen put together and installed in the case with a couple of 3D printed mounts. And there will be links to those. I'm going to put those up on Thingiverse so that anybody can download them and use them. You will not see the LCD screen working yet by the end of the video, because I've got some other mods that are going to be done. I'm going to be adding a drive select switch and a couple other things that it's just easier to do when those boards are outside of the computer. So I'm going to do those mods first, and then we'll get everything put back together and see everything working kind of all at once, I hope. Typically, this isn't the greatest idea, because you want to change one thing at a time so that you don't end up having to troubleshoot a much more complicated situation if something isn't working. But I'm going to risk it. So without any further ado, let's get into getting an LCD screen into this thing. Okay, so this is the new LCD screen. Let's take a look at what's in the box. I will put a source for this in the comments below. So we've got a VGA input cable. We've got a cable here that has 12 volts for the power and a composite video in. We've got our control board right here, and a bag full of a couple of resistors and a connector and a couple little wire ends there. Now for the fun stuff. All right. Here's our screen. All right, so now this screen is being sold as a replacement for the monitor in the SX-64, but it is not a plug-and-play solution. It's not quite as easy as the website makes it sound, okay? This part is fine, but the control board here is the real problem. This is the original control board out of the SX-64. Now, you know, it doesn't take a genius to put those two next to each other and figure out that this is not going to fit in the same space that this was in. Right? Look at where your screw holes are at. Here and here and here and here. So this is not just going to mount right in. Look at the spacing between the controls. All right, this is not going to fit the holes in the SX-64's front panel. So, even though you get this nice little push-button board, we can't use it. So we have to look at a different solution for that. Okay, so to get started on the control board build, I've got a big bag of components here, and I've got my PCBs here. I will put a link in the description below to the website where you can get the parts list, the instructions, and the files to have the PCBs manufactured. There isn't a step-by-step instruction manual, so to speak, but there is sufficient documentation that we should be able to figure this out without too much trouble. All right. So let's tear into this. All right, here are our instructions, and basically it's just the location on the board and what goes there. All right. But this board, let me pull it up here so you can see it better maybe without the glare, is so well marked and so well laid out that it's very easy to see where everything needs to go. So this should be a piece of cake. Now, I'm going to start with the resistors because they're the lowest profile. Now, this board also has integrated into it Jim Drew's SX-64 Ultra Reset circuits. And there's all kinds of cool stuff that does, and we'll talk about that later once it's all finished. So you can see here, this is the parts that are specific to the Ultra Reset circuits. This is for the screen and the volume control. And then these parts down here aren't used. So this is all we really need to put in. So I'm going to start, like I said, with the resistors. One of them will be for the Ultra Reset and 3 for the screen and volume control. And I'm going to do that off camera because otherwise you're just going to see my hands getting in the way of everything. Okay, so I said I'm starting with the resistors because they're the lowest profile. But when I'm populating a board like this, I also want to look at, is there a particular order that I can put the components in that will make it easier to get to everything. So looking at this, I'm going to have a resistor in R1, and that's over here all by itself. So that'll be easy. In R2 and R3, I'm going to have resistors. R2 is here, R3 is here. And then I'll have one in R4, which is here in the middle. So because this one's in the middle, it would probably be easiest to do this one first and then do the ones on the ends. Now, because this is a blank board, resistors are small, it really isn't going to make any difference. But just kind of wanted to give you an idea of what I think a good methodology is when populating components on a board, just to make it easier on yourself, just to kind of, plan ahead a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and start that. We're going to have this 680 ohm resistor is going to go in R4, and 2 of these 220 ohm resistors in 2 and 3. Okay, all 4 of the resistors are in place. And next up is a capacitor going into C1. All right, the capacitor's in, this little blue one right here. Next up are 2 MOSFETs going into Q1 and Q2, that's here and here. Now that is these little guys. Got kind of like a half moon shape to them. Now, what exactly is a MOSFET? If you don't know, well, join the party, because when I started doing this, I'd never heard the term either. So everybody's got to learn sometime. A MOSFET stands for a metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistor. Okay, basically all it does is it acts kind of like a variable switch that allows controls the flow of voltage and current. Okay, so one of those goes in here, one of them goes in here, and you can see on this board it's really well done how it's all laid out, so you can tell exactly how the component goes in there. And now to complete the reset circuit, just need to install this chip right here. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and put a socket in there so I can just stick the chip right in there. You don't have to. I always socket chips whenever I can. So I'm going to go ahead and put a socket in there. Next step, we have to install these pin headers. Okay, and what these are the male connectors that we're going to plug our wires onto, and they're going to go on here. Let me spin this around so you got the same orientation with the picture. So these are where all of our wires are going to come out. Okay. So in order to use this, if you look carefully here, you can see that it's they come in little strips like this, but there's grooves here where you can split them really easily. So I need 3 up here at the top. So I can just snap off 3 and watch them go flying. Right? And then they're going to come up from the bottom of the board and get soldered on like that. So I'm going to go through and install all these pin headers along the edge of the card. Okay, so you can see I've got all the pin headers installed in here. So all that's left are the actual controls. So our volume potentiometer is going to go here. Then we've got power button. We've got the menu, up and down and select switches, and then the reset button. There is a spot for a switch here, but that is not used. So we just need to take those and get those in place and solder them in. All right, here's one of the switches. This is one of the menu up, down, select switches. And you'll see there's only one way this can go in, because we've got 3 pins here and only 2 pins on the other side. So we can see which side has the 3 and which has the 2. These big ones here on the end serve no electrical purpose whatsoever. They're just clips to hold it in place. And if you look on the back of the board, you can even see there's no traces going to those. So we just take this, line it up like so, get it started in the holes, and it'll just snap in. Holds itself in place. So I'm going to snap all the other 3 in there and then solder them all in together. And then the same with the volume potentiometer. It's a different switch, but it's same principle. Okay, so we're getting close. I've got the volume potentiometer on here and our 4 switches for menu, up, down, and select. The only thing that's left is the power switch and the reset button. Power will go on here, reset will go on here. They aren't exactly square, so there is a it does have to kind of go in a particular way, but there's two ways it could go in, and I don't think it makes the slightest bit of difference which way it goes in. Okay, now just have to solder those in place. Okay, well, there's our completed board. There's the reset switch, the power button, volume, menu, up, down, select. I think that's everything we need to solder onto the board. The board, I think, is done. And I need to still clean up the back a bit and clean off some of that excess flux. And then time to make the cables. So here's the back of the LCD screen. You can see that I have temporarily disconnected it from the control board. So let's move that control board out of the way for just a minute. Obviously there are no screw attachment points anywhere on the LCD screen, so we're going to need a bracket. So I have designed a bracket for this. This is just 3D printed. I'll have the STL file in the description below. It'll be up on Thingiverse for anybody to download. My gift to the community. You can see here that what's going to happen is the screen is going to slide down through these slots here, and then there are some screw holes here. I'll show you what those are for here in a minute. These are for attaching it to the case, and then there's a cutout here because there's a screw on the bottom of the case that this has to slide over. Okay, so all we got to do, first we peel off the plastic. And we're going to take this and we are just going to slide it in ever so carefully because we don't want to damage this part of the circuitry here. Okay. And you'll see on the other side, if we hold it in there, it's a perfect fit. So we've got these screw holes here on the top, and you can see that this part of the front bracket here is raised up a little bit. And the reason for that is because I've got this little thing. And this piece is just going to sit on there, and we're going to stick a couple of screws in there, and that's just going to help hold the screen in place so it doesn't get jostled around or want to pop up and pop out as the computer is being moved around. Now, I designed all of these holes to work with a standard M3 metric screw. When I printed it out, the holes came out a little too big. There's a little too much play with a standard M3 screw. I'm going to fix that in the STL before I upload it. But since I don't really want to go to the hardware store right now because it's very cold outside, I dug into my parts bin and I found some other screws that will work for this, so that's what I'm going to use. But like I said, it will be fixed. The holes will be made just slightly smaller so that a standard M3 screw will work just fine. I'm not going to show putting the screws in because all you're going to basically see is my ugly fingers in the picture. Okay, so that's done. See, that's in there nice and snug. It's not going anywhere. So, next up, I want to mount the control board on here somehow so that it's not just flopping around at the end of this little ribbon cable. So I made this bracket. Now these holes here on the side will line up with the ones in the main bracket, like so. And then our control board will sit on these standoffs, like so. And then the ribbon cable can go right back into its connector, nice and easy. So let me get this attached and I'll be right back. Okay, well here it is, screwed into the main bracket, the control board screwed onto the secondary bracket, and the ribbon cable reattached. So you see that's all nice and snug. This will mount very nicely right inside the SX. Okay, so here's a page from the manual for the LCD screen. You can see here this is the layout for the PCB. This is the connector that connects the board to the monitor itself. This is J105. This is the connector that goes to the control board, which we've already built and installed. J103 is a VGA input. Now, I personally can't see why on earth I'd ever want to use a VGA input on this thing. It was originally designed like if you were going to build a portable DVD player or something like that. But if you ever did want to use VGA, it does come with a cable to do that. I can't see ever running a VGA input on this thing, so I'm not even going to install that. The last connector here, J106, is power input and S-video. That's right here. Now the cable that comes with this is obviously way too short to be at all useful. So what I've got to do is build a new cable. So I've got the pinouts right here. There's power and ground. And then here's our S-video input. This is Luma, this is Chroma, and then we're going to need a ground. Okay. And if we look at the SX CPU board, we're going to connect this to the same connector that the original monitor went to, and that's right here at P18. It says internal video. So we're going to make a connector to go right there. And if we take a look at the schematics, and I'll have a link to the schematics below. Here's P18, pin 1 is our Luma, pin 2 is color, pin 3 is audio, and we're going to need that going to someplace else. So we'll have a wire for that, but it's going to go, it's not going to end up at the LCD screen. And then pins 4 and 5 are ground. So we're going to need the Luma and the Chroma and the ground going to the LCD screen, and then we're going to have an extra wire coming off of it for audio that's going to hook up later. Alright, so that cable is made, and let's take a look at what we've got right now. This cable comes out of the board here at the back of the screen and runs over to the back of the control board. This is where the VGA input would go, but as I said earlier, I'm not using it, so there's nothing in there. And then this is the bundle that's going to hook up directly to the SX. Now, this one is 12 volt power, which is the red wire, and black is ground. So there is 12 volts going to the CPU board. So I think that's probably where I'm going to tap into to get the power for this. These three are going to connect to P18 on the CPU board, the internal video. The black is ground, yellow is luma, blue is chroma. And I don't have an end on here yet because I'm going to wait until I get the other boards in here and figure out exactly how long that cable actually is going to need to be. And when I do make the other end of it, there'll be another wire coming off of P18 that's going to go to the speaker. But before I do that, I want to do the work with the other boards. I want to get the insides of the case here repopulated so I know exactly where I'm going to be routing these wires, how long they need to be, and I'm going to have to come up with another mount for the speaker, which is probably actually going to go over here somewhere. And so we're going to have to make sure that we've got wires of the right length for that as well. Okay, so here's where we're at right now. Next up is to work on the floppy drive board, which sits back here. When I built the control board, I included the circuitry for Jim Drew's SX Ultra Reset device. And one of the things that the Ultra Reset can do is control the drive number. So I need to cut the jumpers and wire up the floppy drive board so that it can be controlled by the SX Ultra Reset circuit here on this main control panel. After the drive board is finished, then we'll move on to the CPU board, which will sit over here on the side. And we've got a SID replacement going in, we've got a wire up for a speaker. So we're probably a few episodes away yet from final reassembly and testing of this thing. So thanks for watching and hope to see you soon.